I love what you just said. That Bernie is encouraging the fight in us. That is
Yeah.
that that's
That's
something.
been my motto for the past year. That's why I love Bernie.
Yeah, no, it's
Well,
been
go
it's
ahead.
been so fascinating to see the amount of people, the numbers of people that are actually as progressive, if not further progressive than even Sanders. And Sanders has been giving voice to that, and he's taken it. And I keep going back to that imagery where he's really taken it on the chin for us to come out and be as bold progressives as he's been throughout. We're just catching up with him in terms of his politics. He's been pretty consistent over the years. He's been
Yes.
very consistent over the years. And I love that imagery that he's encouraging the fight inside of us instead of saying, I want to be your spokesperson. Even when he says, I can't do this alone, right? I can go
Right.
to DC, I could win, and I still can't get it done because it's something that has to come from you. What do you say to the opposite side of the equation? Those people who fear that fight, because that fight that's inside of us is very powerful, and it can come into conflict with the reigning paradigm in the Democratic Party, and you have a very strong force coming from the opposite side of this Democratic, this left
Absolutely.
leaning that wants to suppress that. What do you say when we want to them? What do you say directly to them? And then two, what do you say to those of us who are suffering the brunt of their backlash?
Okay. The hardest thing for people to do is take the first step. And sometimes you take the first step and the struggle you're involved in fails. I have to tell you that I found the greatest democratic moment of my maturity, my sort of, let's say, post 50 years of age time, was when Scott Walker and the Republicans took away the collective bargaining rights for public employees here in the state of Wisconsin. It was a major, major act of class war from above.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you don't even know, most people don't, that Wisconsin was the first state in 1959 to grant public employees collective bargaining rights. That is, unionization with collective bargaining rights. I mean, that was a major thing. And here we were 50 and we lost it. Now, we lost it. Why did we lose it? Not simply because the Republicans pushed their agenda, but because the Democrats have for too long failed to act like Democrats in the Roosevelt tradition.
Yeah.
They have repeatedly acted more like Democrats in the Carter tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Sweetness without willingness to support progressive causes. Or, Democrats in the Clinton tradition.
Yeah.
We have a bit of time, right? Because I want to tell a little story about Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton was elected in 92, and I wasn't very keen. My candidate in 92 was Harkin of Iowa, and he didn't make it through to the nomination. But Bill Clinton ran, and he ran on the theme of change, hope and change. I know we've heard of that from all these Democrats, hope and change, except for Bernie. Didn't waste his time on that, okay? Talking about political revolution straightforwardly. Anyhow, so Bill runs, and he played quite often on the fact that his middle name is Jefferson, William Jefferson Clinton.
Yeah.
And at the time of his reenacted, or at least traveled the same path from Monticello, Virginia, Jefferson's home, to Washington, D.C., in order to give his inaugural address in January of 1993. And I was driving into campus and I was listening to his address. And I knew from his speech, it was all over. That we were never going to, that was all, now it sounds sick and cynical, I know. But what he did is he said to Americans, playing on that question of change, playing on the Jeffersonian image, he said, in every, you know what Thomas Jefferson said, he told us? In every generation, Americans need some change. But that's not what Thomas Jefferson said.
Right.
And by the way, I am fully aware of Jefferson's sins. The more important thing right now is Jefferson said, in every generation, Americans will need a rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
But Jefferson Clinton said change. And basically what he was saying is, leave it, we're elected, leave it to us, we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what did he do? He appointed Hillary Clinton to head a secret healthcare commission, or a private closed door healthcare commission, which basically blew the whole healthcare thing so that we wouldn't get healthcare expanded for an entire generation. Now, having said that, Barack Obama did a similar thing. He told young people, yes, we can. And then he comes to Washington and his inaugural address, and I thought, oh no, not again. He said, the debacle I'm paraphrasing, the debacle we confront right now is the fault of all of us.
Right.
Well, that was definitely not true. Okay. Definitely not true. Moreover, I thought for a moment that we were going to see some real, intellectual bravery in his inaugural address in 2009. Most people don't realize that Barack Obama quoted Thomas Paine, the great American pamphleteer and revolutionary, who said, we have it in our power to begin the world over again, who said, the cause of America is the cause of all mankind.
Yeah.
The sun never shone on a cause of greater worth, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, but he never used Thomas Paine's name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, which indicated his fear perhaps of alienating evangelicals who, might have held, a grudge against Paine because he was a deist and not a Christian. Well, what we need in this time of ours is not to let Bernie Sanders fail to speak at the convention and to speak to us in a way that, even if it's an endorsement of Hillary Clinton, reminds us that the future is in our hands, that politics is our responsibility, that movements must literally struggle to enhance American democracy. One of the great things about Americans that we too often forget is that when we confront real crises, and I understand the tragedy and the irony of American history, but the fact is we have made incredible strides, but not simply by, sticking to our guns, but rather we are at our best when we enhance American democracy. In the face of crisis, we carry out revolutions. In 1776, in the Civil War, in the 1930s, in World War II, in the 1960s. And he should remind us of that. And by the way, I'm going off a little bit on this. That's been my greatest frustration with Bernie Sanders.
Unpack that for me.
That he has failed to remind Americans of every generation, not just who they are, but that they are Americans with a rich, radical, and progressive tradition. And to say to them, look, do you know why it is that you're angry about things? It's because you carry a deep cultural memory of the revolution, of the struggle for emancipation, of the struggle for social democratic politics in the 1930s. I mean, that's what I was so eager to hear him say. And by the way, I'm absolutely convinced that some of those folks who go racing over to the Trump side with that slogan, "Make America Great Again," that we could have pulled them to our side, "Make America Great and Good Again."